How's it going, everyone? This is Masenko, and we are here at week 8 of the UGA. This week I am playing up against the Merseyside Marowaks, against my good friend Ancient Jedi, who I've worked with in the past, helping him with his teams. And yeah, just overall, a really wonderful person who I am honestly very scared to go up against. So he has a very strong team, and I would argue that his team is particularly strong against my own team for various reasons. And I'll go into why right now. So basically, um, if we look at my team, we see several things. Some main carries include the Zapdos and the Venusaur. Not to mention, you have mons like Ninetales, who can do a lot of work in this sort of core. And all three of those can be dealt with fairly easily by Glastrier, especially the Venusaur and the Zapdos. Glastrier is one of the strongest Pokemon, I'd argue, in the format, and if set up correctly, can be incredibly difficult to kill. Um, Not only that, but it has snowball potential. So if it's killing you, it it gets easier to kill you more, right? He's kind of a very hard scaling mon because of its ability of chilling Neigh, where every time it gets a kill, it raises its attack by one stage, sort of like Moxie. Um, so this is the first thing I notice, right? Glacier is insanely difficult to deal with. For me, especially, I do have two fighting mons, some fire coverage, but I mean, he's just so tanky. It's really going to be hard for me to break through that, even with those super effective matchups. Um, the next thing I notice is we have some Trick Room mons. Now, one might argue that my team is somewhat Trick Room weak. I don't have many slow mons on the team, except for maybe Machamp. Um, but uh, regardless of that Machamp, yeah, you would argue that I'm kind of Trick Room, not super Trick Room savvy. Luckily, I've drafted in such a way that I have various Trick Room counters, as you've seen last week against the London Lucarios. I have good Taunt users, I have good Prison users, I have Kangaskhan, who's particularly good against certain Trick Room setters. But the difference here is that his Trick Room setters are backed up with very powerful mons that are actually faster than mine. Okay, so the Noivern, the Ribombi, and the Bearscuda, as you can see, are all three of them faster than my fastest Pokemon, being Inteleon, which is actually pretty scary. The fact that he has three different mons who just on their own are just able to do things before I can stop them. Especially this Ribombi, who is actually immune to Fake Out. Now, this is something I didn't know and sort of had to discover last season when it happened to me accidentally while I was running a Ribombi. But its ability Shield Dust removes the secondary effects of attacks. So technically, Fake Out, its secondary effect is flinching, not its primary effect, as many people would use it as. You don't use Fake Out for damage, so it's sort of a little counterintuitive, but it doesn't really work on Ribombi. So that is if it's running Shield Dust. Now against me, there's an argument it might run Sweet Veil, because I have a Venusaur looking to sleep things. But regardless of that, it can be a very threatening Pokemon to me, and for that reason, I do have Kangaskhan a lot of times being my Fake Out user and trying to create space for my team, and being sort of a combo disruptor. But one of the scariest combos I think here is a Speed Swap Ribombi with a Shield Dust ability, speed swapping with this Glastrier, putting him to 124 speed and just wrecking my team. This can also work with Marowak, who is also a quite particularly slow mon at a base speed of 45. He has a lot of really good matchups into this team as well. Biggest thing is that he's a physical fire type, right? Physical fire types are very good against Venusaur. Venusaur has a lot of special defense, so even in Sun, fire types sometimes struggle to do the damage that they need to against a Venusaur. But his defenses are somewhat lower, and Marowak is one of the hardest hitting Mons in the game when you give him a thick club. So I have to be very scared of this. Not to mention he gets Tailwind off this Noivern, who is also, once again, faster than all my Mons. So even if, even if Pangoro isn't particularly fast, you double this guy's speed, he's suddenly outspeeding my Rapidash, and maybe not the Inteleon, if I think about it correctly. Maybe he would. I'm not 100% sure. I think not, just because his base speed is less than half of Inteleon's, but yeah, he outspeed basically everything else with this, like, with these guys. This Claydol is actually very surprisingly fast at 75 base speed, so under Tailwind this can actually be very, very threatening. So yeah, there's a lot here. I haven't even gone to mention the fact that, he has an Amoonguss who is going to pose some problems to me with potential sleep powder, redirection, just being insanely bulky. The other fast Mons like Barraskewda are also particularly strong. They can really, the Barraskewda in particular can really threaten my Kangaskhan with a really fast, hard-hitting close combat. And then they also have this Colossal. I'm not super worried about this Colossal, but it could be scary potentially. Just the fact that it can be faster than all my Mons. It has its steam engine ability. So if they can find a way to proc that somehow, it's difficult. It's really, really difficult for me to deal with. So what do I do against this? Well, let's go into the team builder and find out. All right, here we are. This is the team. And we're just going to start with the biggest thing I think that's necessary in this matchup, which is going to be finding a way to deny setup. His team is very dependent on setup, I'd say. Not super dependent on setup. I'd say that minimal setup gets this team going quite well, but he does have that minimum setup requirements in many cases. You want to get up Trick Room, that's a setup move. You want to get Speed Swap off, that's setup. Tailwind, etc. Amoonguss is going to be disruptive. That's providing space so that the Mon next to it can set up or become aggressive. So I've come up with this sort of double taunt lead with a Safety Goggles Gallade. It's not that... it's hard to say that this is a particularly good lead, but it is certainly doing the trick in practice, based on what we've done so far between myself and Matrix. Just doing some practice. The idea between this lead is that it can kind of shut down a lot of what they're doing. What I love about this Impidimp is that it gets Prankster, and it has a Prankster taunt. So even though the Ribombee and the Noivern are fast, much faster than the rest of my team, I can at least go first and taunt them before they can Speed Swap or Tailwind, respectively. Now, of course, I do believe that one of those is going to be running Mental Herb, and one of those is going to be running Focus Sash. And the real question is which one. Now, let's say the Ribombee is running a Mental Herb, and I find out that it has this by taunting it in Game 1. Game 2, the idea is that I can just Thunder Wave it and max Airstream it with this Gallade to get a one-hit kill, which is guaranteed based on my calcs, which is great. Another thing is that at +1 speed, the Gallade will always outspeed his entire team, even if the Ribombee does Speed Swap. So what the idea is if they lead a Ribombee Glastrier, what I could do is, even if I don't know if it has Mental Herb, I could still taunt and max Airstream it. Yes, even if it has Focus Sash, it lives, but at least it can't get a Speed Swap off. If it's Mental Herb, then yes, it gets a Speed Swap off, but now my Gallade is faster anyway the next turn. Yes, the Glastrier could get a move off before my Gallade does, but both of them will be living this The Glastrier could max Hailstorm this Impotent to get to kill him through Focus Sash with the hail damage. But it's not, the idea is to try to sort of disrupt that setup and put Galliot in a position where he's at least outspeeding the worst threat on the team. So that's where we're going with this idea. Another cute thing we could do is, since I have Justified, I could Sucker Punch my own Gallade to give it a +1 attack. I can fake out stuff, which is really important for stopping Trick Room shenanigans or other setup, or, plenty of other things going on there. Now, the Inteleon that I'm bringing is Choice Scarfed. I realized that I really want to be killing this Noivern a lot. This Noivern could be really, really threatening for my team. So I want just to be able to kill it quickly without it realizing it. Now, even though it has Choice Scarf, Inteleon can be a really nice max target here as well, and I've been actually maxing it quite a lot in practice. This actually hides the fact that it has a Choice Scarf in the first place, which you'll see in this game actually is pretty unnoticeable, I'd say. Like the fact that he has a Choice Scarf, the opponent, HA, doesn't really notice that it has a Choice Scarf, which could be helpful to me, throughout the game potentially. He doesn't know whether I have Protect or something like that. That could be factoring into his decision making on who does what, But otherwise, it's fairly just straightforward coverage. Yeah, so there's that. The Kangaskhan here has running Choppleberry so that the Barraskewda can't just one-shot it. It also has Fake Out, Rock Slide, and Sucker Punch, and then a little bit of extra damage with the Helping Hand. I think I changed one thing. Yes, here's the one thing I changed. So before the game, I actually took Knockoff off and put on Bullet Punch, so I'll just do that real quick. Yeah, so he has Bullet Punch instead of Knockoff. This Machamp here, he's sort of just there to be some extra damage, potentially be okay under Trick Room. I've given him 0 speed here. I should have maybe put him neg speed, but it doesn't really matter at this point. Like the Machamp is kind of there to just, like, if he really has to live a hit from the Noivern, he has a Koba Berry, and the Max Guard can allow me to just disrupt this Glastrier with a Dynamic Punch shenanigans, hit stuff with Stone Edge, Bullet Punch, etc. So he's an okay max target as well, honestly, in a lot of cases. But it's going to be... honestly, there was really no better position for this slot. Like, these last 2 slots, I was having a lot of trouble figuring out who to bring. I really couldn't bring my Sun Mode, and part of the reason I really couldn't is because of that Glastrier, and because just doing it, my Venusaur just couldn't do anything against this team, really. It was very difficult for it to have the space available to even do damage without dying in like 1 turn most of the time. So we just completely abandoned that. But I'm actually really glad that I ended up, instead of a different Mon that I was considering, bringing Klefki. Now, this Klefki set is kind of interesting. It's got Reflect for damage mitigation against all of their big physical threats, the main 3 being the Copperajah Glastrier and Marowak Alola, and Barraskewda even. So Reflect is great. Foul Play to similarly punish these high attack Pokemon. And then we have like a switcheroo full incense situation here. So I'm outsped on both ends of the spectrum, right? I'm undersped and outsped. So what's great about this is under Trick Room, if I give one of his Mons a full essence, they're going to go last in the priority bracket anyway. So it is really nice for shutting down some of his carries, especially the Marowak Alola, who with Thick Club is doing a ton of damage, and without it is doing much less. I can give him a full incense instead. He's now slower even under Trick Room, doesn't have his big club anymore. Perhaps I even have Reflect up, and this Foul Play is going to just do 1,000,000 damage to it. So this is a huge counter to that Marowak Alola, even though it can't really take a fire hit. And of course, the safeguard is there just to protect from shenanigans from that Amoonguss, like putting stuff to sleep. Now, all in all, this does seem like a very delicately knit together team, with each particular move and item and ability chosen in such a way that it deals with specific things. I found it really, really difficult to prep for this team. And yeah, I knew it was going to be a close game, and I knew it was going to be somewhat difficult for me. I knew I'd have to make some like calls throughout the game and like some reads, rather than simply playing a nice even paced game. I would have to take risky plays here and there, which you'll see I do. It's just one of those types of matchups, honestly. And so yeah, let's cut to the game. Let's enjoy, and I'll be at the end for a little bit of a recap. right, so what a game, what a wonderful game, and once again, completely GG's to Ancient Jedi. He played so well, he prepped so well, he did such interesting stuff with this team. So, um, this Max Claydol, I want to talk about for a second that he did before getting into sort of the specifics of um, how certain turns went. This Max Claydol was an excellent idea. Yes, it didn't have an enormous impact on, like, in terms of what it was doing per se, in terms of like damage and threatening my mons. But what it did do was completely shut down any chances I had for priority moves with like basically my entire squad. As you saw, I had, you know, two prankster mons, Klefki and Impidimp, who you saw at that point were just spamming. Well, I guess game one, Impidimp was just spamming Thunderwave at that Noivern, being the only mon it could actually hit with anything. Um, Not to mention, later on, the Klefki was able to reliably use Switcheroo on that Claydol in game two to get rid of his weakness policy because it has Levitate. So the reason is obviously the Noivern and the Claydol aren't affected by Psychic Terrain because they aren't touching it. But anyway, so regardless of this, it's like it's very difficult for me. You know, once he sets up that Psychic Terrain, I am like half my moves are locked out of half his team, right? More than half his team. So yeah, so that's one thing. This Machamp ended up being a bit of a bad bring in my opinion. I kind of regret bringing it in game two. Um, because it obviously was weak to a lot of stuff. The Claydol Max, I should not have done that. The Noivern was threatening to it, even with the Koba Berry. And of course, that Barraskewda had Psychic Fangs, which I hadn't realized at the time, but it definitely made sense, and I definitely should have considered it more. I figured it'd bring something more like Brick Break, but considering I had a Kangaskhan, I knew that I realized that fighting move slot was probably going to go to close combat instead. And Psychic Fangs is good against my Venusaur anyway for super effective damage. So yeah, it made sense that he brought Psychic Fangs, and I should have been thinking about this during prep. So I do think that Machamp was definitely a poor bring in this matchup. Maybe I should have brought something different. Regardless of that, I do think that the Klefki was insanely good during this game. I think I mentioned this to him after the game. We were talking for a little bit, and I sort of said that, like, the fact that he frisked my full incense with that Noivern actually was bad for him because he ended up doing a lot of turns sort of like trying to predict where I was going to switcheroo the full incense, where in reality I was just setting up stuff like Safeguard, Reflect, and like foul playing and whatnot. So yes, yes, he saw that full incense, and it sort of made him play super cautiously, which worked to my advantage in game two. So that was really nice. And obviously, even nicer than that, the Klefki was providing a lot of utility and a decent amount of damage actually with that foul play, chunking him throughout the course of the game. The Kangaskhan, on the other hand, was decent, just sort of a rock slide spamming bot at that point in the game. But the fact that it was difficult to kill and the fact that it was providing a lot of pressure for me to set up and deny him the ability to switch out into something more useful than a Noivern or an Amoonguss in game two was really, really nice. And Kangaskhan actually picked up some kills. It went 3-1, which is really cool. Now, of course, that Barraskewda was pretty threatening overall, just being fast and hitting hard. It was difficult for me to deal with. Sorry, I yawned. And I think I was a little surprised that he never ended up bringing the Glastrier Ramambi combo, though I will say I was exceedingly prepared for it with my lead, being able to max airstream or taunt or whatever, that Rabombi, making sure that it doesn't do what it wants to do. And another thing that I realized after the game when he showed me his set is that Rabombi was running Sweet Veil for the Venusaur, which sort of explains why he didn't bring it, because that meant that if I, on the off chance, tried to fake it out anyway, it would have flinched. So overall, I felt confident in my positioning overall. I think the Galley dying to a double up on turn 3 or whatever was unfortunate in game 1, but I mean, what are you going to do at that point? I think game 1 definitely was sort of a slog in terms of just like getting paralysis off, getting flinches where I needed them. Another thing we noticed, we talked about this a little bit, is I think when you have a game with so many different things that could flinch, I had like Air Slash and Dark Pulse on my Inteleon. I had the Rock Slide. I had Paralysis on Thunder Wave on the Impidimp, etc. You're almost guaranteed to get some flinches here and there, and so yes, I did have good luck in that regard to the passerby eye, but I really think that was just within the range of expected flinching. And I also missed several rock slides that I wanted to miss throughout the course of, or didn't want to miss throughout the course of these games. And I think overall, despite the fact that this game had a lot of RNG dependent moves, or rather, not dependent, but just like moves with RNG, I do think that there wasn't like an exceptional amount of RNG for either side. And I think that Ancient Jedi agreed with that. So yeah, overall, fun game. And I think it was really all about that sort of positioning and making the right calls. And honestly, there's not a whole lot for me to say about it. I really think that it's just sort of one of those games you have to watch and see what's happening on it. And yeah, so great game. Feel free to like this video and help out the channel. Alrighty, peace out, guys.